All right. Ooh, I'm quite a bit taller. Had to start my timer. Okay. I think I know a lot of you guys, but yeah, as Christine mentioned, I am the MS4 coordinator. So the regulatory side of Carol's presentation, that is what we at the in. Sorry, yeah, I got out of breath. It's 3 steps. Um, at the Division of Water Quality, we have the UPDS program, which is the NIPDES program, but Utah State's version of it. Anyways, that's implemented by the Division of Water Quality, and that's how I fit into this. So, as I mentioned, or as my presentation said, we're going to go through expectations, priorities, and assistance, right? 3 parts. Expectations going to be the MS4 permit. That's the guideline, the list of regulations. Priorities, that comes from you guys in your stormwater management plan. And then resources, things that we've done at the Division of Water Quality with the EPA and you guys on how to work together to implement these programs. So I'm going to breeze through some of these things for the sake of time. And thankfully, Carol kind of went through this a little bit, but the term MS4 describes both the infrastructure used to convey stormwater as well as the owner or operator of that infrastructure. And then that's where, sorry, I think all those donuts are stuck in my throat a little bit, but that's where the MS4 permit comes in, right? So certain cities, entities, and operators are required to obtain coverage under the MS4 permit. It has 6 minimum control measures, which we'll go into, and that's kind of the guidebook. Those are the rules on how you, as an MS4 operator, the stormwater system operator, are to protect water quality. As we know with stormwater, there's a lot of things that can get into it and that ultimately can discharge to the streams and waterways, right? So the MS4 permit breaks this down into 6 minimum control measures that are I like to think of like buckets of topics that have a lot more specific information in them and different requirements contained within them. So first things first, public and education and outreach on stormwater impacts. That's our first minimum control measure. This is because as an MS4 system operator, you have so many users of your system, right? You have so many people that are, and by users of the system, I mean people that are driving around your system, people that are living in your system, industry, construction sites, all these users of your system that could be introducing contamination into your system. And guess what? You got a big old system that can take a lot of that funnels water and can discharge that, ultimately to streams and rivers. So first step is to educate those audiences and making sure that your education is specific to the pollutants and the pollutant sources of those audiences. For construction projects, making sure you're targeting keeping sediment on site so it's not gumming up your system. For residents, targeting grass clippings, fertilizer, things like that are relevant to those communities. And then I have a little graphic there where stormwater flows, everything goes, right? The regulation component is really brings the water quality. This is a permit to discharge stormwater, and a big component of that in stormwater is establishing upstream protections in order to, because once it starts raining, it's very challenging to stop those pollutants, right? So number 1 is education and outreach. Number 2 minimum control measure is public involvement and participation. So this is, I will say, an AI generated image. I thought it was kind of funny, but volunteer events, engaging your stakeholders, having advisory committees, adopt a storm drain, making, I know that I live in Salt Lake City and they have that program, and I sometimes think that I should go into that because I know a little bit about stormwater and stormwater maintenance, not as much as some of you guys, of course, but This minimum control measure is really trying to engage those stakeholders that are users of your system as an MS4 operator, and make sure that they know that it's part of their program as well. Like, they get a say in how the stormwater management plan is implemented in their area. All right. Um, so that's the second minimum control measure. The third, this is maybe the most, at least I think, the most obvious minimum control measure, as to why we might need this, right? And that's illicit discharge detection and elimination. And as I mentioned before, right, a stormwater system is literally designed to take water away from the streets and from areas that runoff is happening, and then transporting it through a series of pipes and conveyances, and then get it as almost as quickly as possible sometimes to the streams and rivers, right? Make sure our streets don't flood. Make sure our parking lots don't flood. So that's literally what a stormwater system is designed to do, right? And as we've mentioned before, it takes stormwater, but also can take fuel from a crash that happened on the road. It can take our good neighbor down the street who's cleaning out their paint can into a nice inlet that goes nowhere, right? In their minds, right? So that's kind of where the IDDE portion of this comes in, the illicit discharge detection elimination. So obviously, in order to effectively know what's happening in your system, you have to have mapping of your system. Where do these pipes go? How do they connect? And where do they discharge? You have to be able to prohibit folks from doing that, at least knowingly, right? From connecting sometimes sewer connection, sanitary sewer connection to your storm drain infrastructure. And then the IDD plan, I think of that as our preventative maintenance, looking at priority areas, as well as dry weather screenings, right? If there's water in our stormwater infrastructure, when it is not raining, we got to know what it is, right? Because it really should only be, for the most part, conveying stormwater. So that's the preemptive part. Obviously, investigating illicit discharges when they do happen, illicit discharges, dumping, or spills. Reporting of that's part of that education and outreach, making sure people know when there's an issue and how to report that. And then training and education of staff. Illicit discharge, detection, elimination. I think this is just my opinion. Likely, this is why I think this permit might have started in the first place, right? Because you have such a system, a large network of things that can convey stormwater, but also other pollutants, right? Okay, construction site stormwater runoff control. For those of you that are local to Utah, which I think is most of you, you are certainly familiar with construction. And the reason we have this minimum control measure is because of photos like this, right? Construction sites, just similarly to a home or an industrial facility, they're users of an MS4 system, right? And if there are not best management practices, BMPs installed, you better believe that sediment or fuel or concrete waste or washout is going to go right into that unprotected inlet, right? So that's the reason for the construction stormwater minimum control measure. There's also a state permit for construction stormwater sites for anything that's greater than an acre. And so the MS4 authority, since these construction sites are a user of your system, are required to have oversight of construction projects, and they help implement and regulate the construction stormwater permit on behalf of the state. So components of that are, prior to construction, reviewing a construction project stormwater pollution prevention plan, conducting a pre-construction meeting, discussing stormwater, why it's important, and how to protect pollutants from getting into that, and then identifying priority sites. So in IDDE, we identified priority sites. In construction, we identified priority sites. You better believe priority sites are based on water quality and location to sensitive waterways, right? So kind of each step of this MS4 permit has a way to prioritize water quality amongst other factors as an important thing, right? This is a permit to protect water quality. During construction, there's oversight, monthly or biweekly for priority sites, inspections, and then, of course, training and education of MS4 staff. You'll see that as a theme as well. Okay, the fifth minimum control measure. This one, maybe you can't read it. It's pretty small. It's a long heading. Long-term stormwater management in new development and redevelopment, sometimes called post-construction stormwater management. So this one, active phase construction. This one is post-construction. So you have a lot of users who are redeveloping or new development. We actually do have quite a bit of new development in Utah, unlike in the East Coast, where yes, absolutely, they have to control their stormwater during construction. But what about after construction? We got to make sure that they have infrastructure in place to not only protect water quality, but also make sure we're not flooding a system, right? So this whole minimum control measure is controls for new development, redevelopment, designed to manage stormwater after development has been completed. So things that are components of this is retention of the 80th percentile rain event, a requirement to evaluate for low impact development or green infrastructure. So this is things that the MS4 operator, the manager of this system, is requiring of new and redevelopment sites within their jurisdiction. And then require stormwater control selection, design, installation to protect from the potential pollutants that are going to be discharged from that site. So if this is going to be a gravel mine, making sure that their stormwater controls are adequately filtering out sediment, right? Things like that. And then, of course, that's putting in the infrastructure. There are requirements to inspect and make sure that those controls are adequately maintained. Can't do that if you don't have an inventory of all those controls, right? Public and private. And then, of course, training and education of MS4 staff. This is the last minimum control measure, MCM6, we call it. This is pollution prevention and good housekeeping at municipal operations. So this is specific to the MS4 operator in their facilities. And this is because, as those of you that are in this regulated sphere, maintaining infrastructure generates waste, and you have to store that somewhere. And this minimum control measure is just designed or requires that MS4 operator is also not impacting water quality at their facilities. So don't worry, there's a high priority, a prioritization as well. And if it meets these prioritization factors, it's got to develop a stormwater pollution prevention plan for those facilities and conduct those inspections. You got to have SOPs, standard operating procedures, for all of the operation and maintenance practices that you do. If you're sucking out storm drains, you got to make sure that that's being done and it's protective of water quality and that waste is being disposed of appropriately. If you have a salt facility, that's got to be contained, controlled appropriately so that the MS4 is not also, because you are a user of your system, but you're not also causing pollution to your system. Floor drain inventory. This is, to make sure that there's not cross connections, or if there is a floor drain that's connecting to stormwater, we're not storing things above that, right? And so this is an inventory of all the floor drains in city-owned facilities or MS4-owned facilities, spill prevention plan, retrofit. Carol went into that a little bit. Making sure that if there were areas in your jurisdiction that improvements could be made to protect water quality, those are being done. And of course, training and education of MS4 staff. Okay. Cool. Just want to check my time. Okay, so how do we do this? How do we prioritize this? This is a lot for every MS4. Most cities in the Wasatch Front are regulated MS4s. Universities are regulated MS4s. UDOT is a regulated MS4, Department of Transportation System. So this is all done and prioritized using a stormwater management plan, a written plan with measurable goals that describes the MS4 stormwater program and how it relates to water quality, right? So this is how the MS4 entity plans to implement these permit requirements with milestones and goals, tracking of stormwater program effectiveness, and then develop, implement, evaluate, repeat, right? So when I was asked to give a presentation on prioritizing the MS4 permit, I struggle with that because as a regulator, it's important. All things are important in the permit in my eyes, right? And I understand we have to tailor that, but that's really where your stormwater management plan comes into play, right? These are likely already created. And what do I do if it's already created, right? Well, then we prioritize it. The easiest way to do that is review. This is also a requirement. Review and update it annually. This is a good way to know if you're not doing something in your program, make sure it's a permit requirement and make it easier for yourself, right? That can happen in your review. Train all relevant staff annually. This is a good way to see if there's anyone else that can help you with this program. Maybe there's, your engineering program doesn't do much with your stormwater staff, but they do a pre-construction meeting and they could easily talk about SWIP. Track tasks. This is probably the hardest thing. And then report annually on those tasks. So I guess what I'm trying to say with this is if you review it annually and make sure that the plan is specific to you and your operations, then you'll have a better chance, I think, of success in implementing these requirements. Okay, the other thing folks wanted when discussing this was resources for new stormwater coordinators. Say you came into this and you didn't used to have this and now you do. Anyways, there's no substitute for reading the small MS4 permit, so you have to read the permit. Just do that first. Then use other regulated MS4s. They all have coverage under that same, most have coverage under that same small MS4 permit. And then there is a resource guide for new MS4 stormwater coordinators available on the DWQ website. All MS4s, read the permit. There's also Stormwater Coalition. That's kind of what Carol was mentioning. We do have overlap with folks where we can work together and collaborate and implement these requirements together. USWAC is another kind of advisory committee. Our website, EPA website, there's a lot of resources. And then this is just our website. I pulled all of the things. I sometimes think I spend a lot of time curating this website, and I think that folks don't often go to it, my MS4 permittees. So there are things on the website. So please do look at it. And if you want other resources, you can reach out to me. We also have a great team. This is the general permitting team, some of whom are right there for DWQ. Okay, I did it. Questions? Okay. Thank you.